This podcast is rated E for explicit. Dear love interests, how much does your appendage mean to you? You say that thing is the most important thing you do. How can someone with good senses be convinced so easily to do the things you do? Dear love interests, you were wondering why my fences wouldn't come down for you. Because a few inches aren't long enough to attach my value to. You met me in the midst of many things. Shedding skin, sprout wings. Looking at life as a spiritual being through a human lens. Having conversations with God about so many things. This show is your invitation. The poet God is the conversation. There's a long history of black men and frankly black people in general being fetishized by every race, including our own. But has this been to our detriment? And more specifically, has the black man's value in our society been anchored in the size of his appendage? Can we as a society get past the black penis? Or will we be forever mesmerized, hypnotized, or is that dickmatized? And even if society can't, will we as black men broaden our own ideas surrounding who we are and what we're worth beyond whatever size we happen to be? Or will the size of our penises, for better or worse, be held high as part of our identity? So who better to have this conversation with other than 4 black men who all happen to be members of the board? Calvin.
What is it that these people are looking for? I mean, because it sounds to me they're just looking for a big dick.
Gary.
You didn't create this, but if you yourself know that you're not fitting into that box, psychologically, you're feeling that you're not fully a man. Something is missing.
Nick.
I'm not responsible for proving anything to you. Like, you find out how you find out, and that's on you.
Aaron.
They castrated us. And the reason why they castrated us was because they were in fear of the big black penis.
They may have had a little too much fun with this discussion. Well, let's get started.
Okay, so one of the things that I have been tasked with exploring has been the quintessential component of sexuality called sexual tourism. Now, sexual tourism is considered a happy medium for white middle-aged Americans, women specifically, that go to places like Africa, that go to places like Jamaica, that go to places that are primarily inhabited by African American men who have been blessed, as we all would say, with big penises. These women pay for sex, they pay for company, they pay for companionship.
What's the driver behind that? I mean, in terms of like, what is it that these people are looking for? I mean, because it sounds to me they're just looking for a big dick, right? And there's probably some fetish around it being a black man. So I want to explore that before we talk about the fact that people are going on trips to pay for it.
I think they saw Stella got her groove back, and
That she did.
when that one tear came from her eye, y'all knew that she had fallen in love. That one tear.
Oh my God.
So, keeping with our topic of love, though, do we think this is about love, or is it something else?
Well, so let me break it down a little bit more, and that's a good question, Calvin. So, one of the things that is really transparent, or really apparent, I should say, with these women is that they have been in relationships where they have been abused, they've been cheated on, and they are looking for some type of solace. Now, this is the thing. They've gotten all types of money from their past relationships, or they may be independently wealthy, who knows, but they're looking to spend some money for a good time, and they're looking to spoil these black hung men.
Oh, you gotta meet the qualifications.
Unique qualification.
I don't know what to think of that. I definitely understand the concept of paying for sex. I understand it as a concept, right? But I'm trying to really get my head wrapped around why it has to be a hung black man.
But you know what? I wonder if that's the way they think about it. If they think about it as paying for sex, or do they think about it as going on a girl's trip and having a good time? You know what I'm saying?
But are those different? I
don't know. I guess it depends on what your definition of having a good time is.
I'm going to tell you. I just think this scenario, I'm just thinking in my head, if I was Molly and I was going to take a trip with my girls, why not make it to, go to Morocco, get a group of black guys, hang out with them for a while, have a good time, and then come back to our regular lives? Is that really wrong?
What's the fascination with black men and big penises, and why does Molly and her crew have to purposely select those particular countries, that gender and that identity, to make herself and her friends, quote unquote, have a good time?
Yeah, I think that what we're doing, we're all dancing around this idea, and I'm not sure why we won't just dive into the fact that this is about the stereotype about black men with big dicks. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's talk about that stereotype, and then we can talk about Molly and why it is that she's stuck on that. Because I think that we all have heard this. We've all probably lived through it, especially since there are 5 black men in this room. Mm-hmm. And my question really is, where did that come from, and why is it still here? We know that men are diverse. We know that black men are diverse. So why is the stereotype still something that we all have to live with?
When we were discussing it in the pre-show, I was thinking, what was coming up for me is, I wonder if this is something that we've taken ownership of as black men and anchored our self-worth in it as a broader, idea of who we are, and we've embraced it, right? That, this is part of what the black experience is like, and you should, experience that.
True.
For the diversity and inclusion's sake.
That's a good point.
And then I also, along that same line of thinking, wonder, have we also, in embracing that, done ourselves a disservice and devalued ourselves in the process on the back end by playing with, fulfilling those stereotypes? Has that been what it cost us? Because when you find yourself in a situation where you're dating somebody of a different race, and they come into this romantic space with you, and they want to be in, or at least on the surface, that's what they're saying, they want to be in a relationship with you, and then you find out down the line that, maybe you came in with some stuff that wasn't even about me, right? It was about your idea of us, and that we all have, or when you finally decide that you had sex with them for the first time after dating them for 6 months, and they find out, well, I guess not all black men are well endowed. At least not in the way that I thought, because they probably had expectation that you were a couple inches short of, and they want to know where the rest of it is.
But how, then I'm not responsible for your expectation.
You know, so
that's your bias. Like, you lack awareness around that, and you want to box me. I'm not responsible for proving anything to you. Like, you find out how you find out, and that's on you. Like, I'm not.
So, I mean, I was thinking something that Kill said earlier, that, you know, there's a whole bunch that he said, like 10 things that we can talk about. But I want to actually try to see if we can talk about the whole thing about how we boxed ourselves into it, right? So, like, what does that mean? And who is this we we're talking about that's done the boxing? Because the way I look at it, too, is that it has become, or was at least in the 70s and 80s when I was growing up, watching TV, that was part of popular culture. It was everywhere that this was the thing. And if you didn't, that also affected your own self-worth, right? The question I have is, like, you know, who's making these rules, all right? And is this something that it's escapable? You know, I mean, I'm just trying to explore the whole boxing idea. How did it happen? You know, what are the examples of that got reinforced in society? Where does it come from? Really?
But part of the boxing in too is created masculinity. So it's like you have to be this way to be masculine, and if you're not in this box, as you say, you're less than a man, even though this is a physical constraint that you have no control over. This is how you were born. This is how you didn't create this. But if you yourself know that you're not fitting into that box, psychologically, you're feeling that you're not fully a man. Something is missing. Because this is what you were told.
But let me add one piece to that. We're not talking about masculinity in general. We're talking about black men, right? And I think that's where my question is: how did black men get put into this kind of box?
I think, honestly, there's a lot of recognition that comes from that. There's a lot of approval that comes from that. And if that is something that you're looking for, something that you're denied, then of course this is the thing that now gives me some sense of prominence or some sense of it. I'm particularly thinking about slavery, honestly.
Yes.
And gives me some sense of power, some sense of value when I'm being demeaned all the time. And so it then becomes almost an archetype, and white people feel entitled to that. Like, that's some shit that they made prominent, that's some shit that they gave us.
Yeah, absolutely. And to Nick's point, I am 100% in agreement with that. So if we think about slavery, if we think about lynching, if we think about some of the things that anti-blacks actually did to us, one of the major things that they did was they castrated us. And the reason why they castrated us was because they were in fear of the big black penis. The black penis is tied to what we consider ego strength. And our egos a lot of times are inflated or deflated based upon the size of our penises. My question to you would simply be this. It would be, do we feel like someone who has a bigger penis, does that actually equal pleasure? Do these white women think that because they are with men with bigger penises, does that actually equal pleasure? In the words of a friend of mine, he would probably say something along the lines like this: my Humana insurance don't cover that big dick.
Well, you talking about pleasure. I was thinking about pain. Just to be clear. Yeah. There's two sides to that pleasure. But, well, there's that saying. I don't know who said it, if it was somebody's song, but it hurts so good. I think that would be accurate in regards to that. And maybe that's what they're looking for, actually.
I do think that you're right, that the pleasure thing is a deal, but I think it's a lot of fantasy too. Like, I do think that that there is that there is the unknown. You know, you're crossing a line. You're getting, and I'm talking specifically about this situation where it's going from white to black, right? But I do think that there's still some of that from black to black as well.
I think those keep bringing up slavery, honestly, but when white people have a belief system that the role of a black person is to bring them pleasure, is to make them happy, is to fulfill whatever need or desire it is that they have. And that message gets passed down generation to generation.
Yes.
And it shows up in different contexts, but it's the same shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the same mindset.
And you know what? As you say the generation to generation thing, I think about Pornhub and these fantasies that they got set up. When you go through the list and you look at all of these categories, I'm like, what the fuck? Like, what?
So can I add that when I said fantasy, I didn't want to say porn, but yes.
We are talking about dicks.
Yes.
It's okay, Calvin.
Yes.
I'm a little squeamish
shame.
sometimes.
When?
No, but I mean, I think that that's a great point, though, is that that's one of the places I think it gets reinforced. And because really there's a very select few black men who are doing those, right? And for some reason, I feel like people extrapolate that to being the rest of us.
Yes. Absolutely.
And the other point I wanted to make about that too is, so when you look at some of these scenarios that are crafted for their viewing pleasure, white man, white wife, I want a black man to come fuck my wife, and I want to watch, that, and this whole thing, like there's so much of those type of things going on. I'm like, wow, I guess that's a thing. So you wonder how much of that comes from, how much of that has been passed down from generation to generation. Was that going on the plantation? Like what?
Oh yeah.
Was the chosen Negro or whatever brought in, so that the master could watch him?
Absolutely. Black bodies have been being fetishized
Preach.
for forever. Like that, and then we get shamed. But our bodies are fetishes to so many people. Yeah.
And that's why I wonder about how in an interracial relationship situation do you know the difference, right? That when it's something that when you're in it with me for me, and not because I'm black or not because of your ideas around my blackness and what that might mean. How do you sort all of that out in a interracial relationship?
So I think that's a tough one. Because I really don't think it's always clear, and I don't think it's always communicated. I do think that there are plenty of times where that fetish is actually the case, but the other person denies it, right?
Well, if I'm looking at your friend circle, and all you got is black friends, that might be a clue.
Come on.
Didn't I say something about red flags and how people look at them as just pretty colors? But
That's the flag.
Crimson.
Exactly. I want to be clear that I do believe that there are going to be plenty of situations where the people themselves mesh. There's that. I don't think you can completely 100% get rid of the fetish from it simply because it is a cultural thing.
Yeah.
Right? But I don't necessarily know if that's the driver, right?
Right.
And that's why I'm trying to show a little bit more openness, because I think that it's possible. But I do think that there are going to be plenty of situations where the fetish thing is that, and you, in your level of security about who you are, have to be able to recognize that. Because there are plenty of us who just need a man.
Oh,
okay.
We just need a woman to make us happy.
Yeah,
we don't really looking about how they really feel about us.
And so because of that need, are you saying it's okay to fetishize me a little bit? That's fine.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's like, I need to have you in my life because I need to have that thing to hug. And if you just looking at me for this, that's okay for now.
And so the question then to me is, how much is that gonna cost me? Right. You fetishizing me. How much is that going to cost me? And is it a price that I'm willing to pay to be with you?
Yep. I know. I think that's a good point, because I think that if people close themselves off completely to that before it gets far enough, you may actually be losing out on something. But you still need to recognize it's there so you can make the right decision before it's too late.
I am open to the idea, right, that we could start out and you could be all into my blackness and your hair because of it. And then down the road, you actually got to know me, and maybe you getting to know me will broaden your idea of what a black man is and can be. I'm there for that. I'm here for that, you know. But if your ideas around my blackness is so loud that my sense of identity and who I am and who that has nothing that's beyond that, you never see me. We were talking about being seen. If you never see me beyond that, then I'm not willing to pay that price. I'm not willing to pay that that price for your fetishism and for you to have that experience. No, you could have that experience with somebody else who don't give a fuck, because I do.
So many of you have told me how much these conversations matter. As we continue to open our hearts and share our lives with you and each other, we ask you to be our wings. Spread the love by sharing the podcast. And if you haven't, rate and review. What takes just a couple seconds goes a long way in making dreams come true. The conversation continues when we return.
Listen, I know you've been thinking about starting a podcast, and trust me, I am tired of hearing you think about it. And this ad is too short for me to explain telepathic abilities to you. But what I will tell you is that you can do it for free and be as cheap as you are and as cheap as you want to be. And Anchor has the tools for you to do so creatively. Now, as soon as you submit, your friends can listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever they prefer to listen to the shit. And you can make money on a little thing called listenership. So just get to it and download the free Anchor app. Or go to anchor.fm to get started.
I mean, let's look at that. Drill down on this. Let's think about slavery, as Nick so eloquently stated. Even now, modern day slavery, American sports.
I love it.
Yeah, let's look at how we are being paid, yes, but being quote unquote worshipped because of our bodies, because of what we can do physically.
Don't bend the knee though. Because if you bend that knee, bitch.
Yeah. You are
but
a fucking traitor.
Come with limitations, okay? If you're going to objectify something, you're putting them in a box, and you don't want them to get out of that box.
Correct. Right.
And I think that I didn't even think about the angle for sports. I mean, like, God, that's like one of the most glaring examples of how we've defined it in our culture, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't always this way, right? But if you look at today's sports, you can't run from it. Right. Even in football, where they didn't even used to show faces and bodies that much because they had helmets and stuff on. People in interviews are doing interviews with crop tops on. They're wearing these tight Nike spandex things, running around through practice and showing that all on TV. That's definitely reinforcing that fetish.
You know what? I didn't even think of it like that.
That's absolutely right.
But you're right. It's so in your face.
Yeah,
bulges everywhere. Like. No, but for real though, now that you say that, like that's a whole moment.
I had to take a moment to think about it too, because I was like,
God.
And all these moments of just watching games and pre-show interviews and after game interviews, and I'm just like, oh, really? Yeah, it's just it's out there.
Was that your reaction?
Well, yeah, because at first, it's just like anything else that you've just accepted as being a part of life.
Yeah.
You don't think about it. But when you do think about it, you actually see it.
So,
yes.
With that in mind, my question is this. Can we honestly blame, getting back to the article, can we honestly blame Barbara and Esther and
In Mali.
In Mali and
Not
you
Barbara.
know, yeah. You know, some
Old school
No,
child.
and so okay, so you know what? I begged the question at the beginning. Can is what's wrong with that, right?
Listen.
And this roundabout that we just talked about just shows we can't. I don't think we can blame them because it's something that is systematic. I mean, it is. It's all out there, and it ain't stopping anytime soon.
I disagree.
Ooh.
Because I think at some point you can see some shit. Like, you can recognize some shit, at least to be able to start being curious about some shit. Like, at some point, like, you don't get to live your entire life and blame somebody else and not take responsibility for your own mindset and your own perspective. If that's the work that you want to do, be an adult and do your work. Like, you don't know. No. I'm not absolving you of that because of that. Yeah, that was you inherited it. No, like, do your work.
Because at the other end of that mindset, what is it that you imagine the experience to be on the other side for the other person who you're, thinking that way about?
You're assuming that they imagine the experience for the other person.
Well, they were correct.
That's very true.
Well, I'm telling you, you're listening. What do you think?
No, I mean, I look. I think that's a good point, but I really do truly think that if you're truly objectifying them, then you don't give a damn about how they really feel. You say you do. Mm-hmm. I'm helping them out. They need this money, or whatever, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's not really that person that you're connecting with. You really are truly. You're doing it for your own needs,
right?
And you're putting up, just as Nick said, your own blinders. And I'm glad he really went hard on that point about not absolving them, because I think he's absolutely right. At some point in today's world, where we have a lot of information that's all around you, you do have to take ownership for the fact that information is there for you to consume, and you just chose not to.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna read a little bit about what the young man's perspective is.
Okay.
And some of the African men, as well as the Jamaican men, feel like they are on the come up, to be honest. But this is what they said. And I want you guys, as much as you can, to really take this in. One young man told me that the white women he had sex with made him feel sick. They stink. They have rough skin and look like old dogs. No wonder they have to pay for a man.
Do you have any other perspectives?
Everybody's sitting over here with their mouth open. Like,
Wow.
I don't even know where to start with that.
Wow.
So I thought that was going to be a completely different thing.
I am dead.
No, I mean, that is definitely a perspective I've heard before.
Wow.
And I do see that, because to me that's an empowering statement about your own self-worth, where you instead of you just accepting, oh, they paid me to have sex and I'm good with that, you're actually making a counter judgment towards them.
Yeah. And also that you could be paid to sleep with a dog.
But then what did Audre Lorde say? Do you dismantle the master's house with the master's tools?
Come
Is
on.
that actually what's happening here or no?
Say more about that.
I'm just saying, if you're using the same thing that's used against you as a like, is that actually is that getting us anywhere? What's the productivity of that?
I see.
I'm not saying I have a point on that or not. I'm just saying I'm
No,
curious
no,
about.
I mean, so I really feel like we think that we're answering questions, but I think honestly, I think that having perspective and asking questions of each other and having conversations is really what it's about. Because we, just like we said last time, we're not going to solve any of this stuff right now, but we can definitely start the conversation and start moving towards something, right? And that's a good point. But one perspective that I was wondering about is, what's the perspective of somebody who actually feels like this is beneficial for them? And I was thinking that there were going to be some of that kind of reaction as well.
Is it official? When you say official, you mean
Beneficial.
Beneficial. Oh, I see.
In what way? Beneficial.
Financially beneficial. So
I was purposely vague, because I would love for somebody who's in this to tell us something that they feel is positive about it.
Well, the thing that sticks out to me when he said that they thought it as a come up. Mm-hmm. Well, you have to be really low. That's what
Not necessarily. I mean, this is something similar to like a sugar daddy kind of situation. There are people who go into the situations and they go into it and they're getting financially beneficial, and the level of where they are is not low. Some of the people are educational people, they have degrees they've had, but it doesn't have to be. They're getting something out of it. For them, it's financially beneficial. Yes. So that's what their benefit is.
Well, my comment is more specifically to the way these guys described these women as.
Well, that's one person.
So it's more specific to that in their case, if you feel that way.
But think about it from a little bit different perspective on the come up with that. Mm-hmm. Basically, if they're having to pay you, right, that puts you at a certain level of highness. Right.
To me, it reinforces that idea that, especially if it's because you have a big dick, that this is what your value is.
Right. Because that's money. I can control how much money, like I can literally put a value on that.
Yeah.
And I got more than that. If I'm giving you money, that's out of my surplus. Like I'm always going to be empowered because I have more money.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, well,
I've determined your word.
I'm going to challenge that by saying, I am so good that you have to pay me. That puts me in the position of power. And that's all I'm challenging, is that for some people, I have to imagine that this is empowering for them. For some people. Because when we talked earlier about the black man with big dicks and how they think they're all that, that's the example that I'm talking about here, where I'm all that.
I hear that. But I only agree that works if you don't need something from them.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That don't work if I'm actually in need of something. This is supporting my life. I don't have to need nothing from you. I'm doing this just because I want to, just because I enjoy it, just because it's fun for whatever reason. But there's no need. There's no deficit here that this is meeting.
Yeah, that's a big difference.
That is a big difference.
Very different.
That's a good point. I mean, I just feel like there's going to be a whole bunch of perspectives on this, right? Yeah. And I'm challenging us to take a look at all of them. Or as many as possible.
So one of the statements that was from Barbara actually stated this. She said, I knew that they were keen on my money, but they only live like paupers. And paupers, of course, as you all probably know, is poor people. So typically what happens is the women pay for dinner, they pay for entertainment, they pay for everything, and then they give these men from the Dominican Republic, Africa, Jamaica money in order to live. So it's almost like a lifestyle change, according to what the article is saying.
It sounds like they treat them like they're pets or something. Or some shit.
Exactly. But I think that reinforces the point that Nick just made.
So
there is a need here that they're getting met by this.
It's so
and that quote right there tells me that woman is saying that she's the one who's powerful.
Just the way she's talking about it.
So I'm just admitting that Nick made a great point that bears out in these posts.
Yeah. Girl, Barbara.
Barbara has woke me out, child.
Look,
okay.
I still feel like Barbara can be redeemed, right? But I do think that this situation, this system that's set up, because this is not a one-off. This is systematic.
Yeah.
There's somebody benefiting from setting these up, right?
Right.
That's the thing that I have the biggest problem with, is because it's reinforcing it. So who's setting the system up? I mean, what's going on there?
And let's not act like this is not happening with Phil.
Yeah.
Or Jim.
Yeah.
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 And also, you're right. With it goes both ways that way for sure, because just the same way that black men are being fetishized, black women have been done the same way. And speaking of them, I was telling Aaron that I had came across a radio program, and they had one of these hot topics. And it was around this whole idea of black women not needing anything other than their men to be good in bed, that they can take care of themselves. They don't need you to hold the door.
That was for me.
I just wanted to make a Game of Thrones reference, but
They don't need you to do nothing else but be good in bed.
And I have never heard that before. I mean, I'm actually interested in reading this article because, you know, I lived in a house full of women, right? You know, my family is very, very female heavy. You know, we got mom, and two sisters. You know, of course, I got my stepdad there, but that just makes two males in there. But if you look at our bigger family, it just becomes more and more female the further you go out. And so I've never heard of the concept of these women not needing more from their men, because that was a chief complaint, is that their men weren't giving enough.
You know, I think, and it wasn't an article, it was this topic on the show, but I think what I was hearing from the women that were calling in was that it was a thing about not, kind of an empowering thing for them.
Meaning not being dependent.
Not being dependent.
Okay.
Right. Not being dependent, and that, you know, it's okay if he doesn't have a job. It's because I got mine, and of course these were the women who were calling in. I'm not saying that every woman was expressing that sentiment.
I get it.
But there was a good amount of them that were calling in and saying, "No, I don't know. I'm good. You just show up when I call you."
Subscribing matters, and we want to thank you for doing that. But if you want to be the first to know when new episodes are available, follow me at The Poet God on Instagram or Twitter. We'll be right back after these messages.
Hey guys, I'm Joseph, a member of the board, which is what Akil refers to as his community of friends and supporters.
We all have something valuable to give. And sometimes it's as simple as giving someone else a reason to live.
On behalf of all the board members, I want to thank you for listening to our podcast. Akil's success is our success, and we want you to be a part of the community we are building.
It's not enough. It's not enough.
Because you are the very foundation we must build it on.
It's not enough to tell people that they matter. We have to show them. Like my friends showed me.
So tell a friend, leave a review, and keep in touch. We want to hear from you because it all matters. Just as you do.
So you trying to be that podcast I listen to on the way to work? Well, there are two scenarios you need to consider. Life with Anchor and life without Anchor. With Anchor, it's one-stop shopping, baby, and it's 100% free, and that's for recording, hosting, and distribution. Without Anchor, listen, baby, it's just a bunch of costly solutions. With Anchor, it couldn't be any more user-friendly. Without Anchor, you're gonna wish you didn't spend a penny. And talking about a penny, with the great sponsors Anchor will match your podcast with, you'll make plenty. With Anchor, you'll start making money from day one. Without Anchor? Don't quit your day job, son. But go to anchor.fm/start and find out why Anchor is the place for those who podcast with heart.
Does the big dick make up deficit? In other words, what I'm saying is, if you have a big dick, does that actually make up for you not working, you not providing, you not being anything other than a fuckboy?
Well, I think for some of them, that's what they were expressing. That's how I heard it, you know.
not long term.
Okay, so not long term, but it is sometimes long term. This is something I did want to talk about is that there are plenty of women who were in my lives before. They always complained about their men not being no damn good or whatever. But then they said, but I can't get rid of him because his dick is good. That I cannot tell you how much I've heard that in my life.
Really?
Yes. And these men would even go to work drunk because they knew if they got fired, homegirl's not going to kick him out.
So and
stuff like that, where that was their power.
In a sense, it sounds like what was their power was also their handicap.
Yeah. Why do you call it a handicap?
Because
I mean, I'm just saying, I'm that guy. Just like I'm that guy right now.
Yeah, because it seems like
I'm getting everything I need and want.
You've anchored, number one, your worth in this, right? But you anchoring your worth in this has also limited you in another sense. And
I'm getting everything I need and want.
You've never had to evolve to be any other thing than somebody with a big dick.
But good and big is not the same thing. You said good, right?
Yeah, but that's how they describe it.
So you consider that to be the same?
Yeah, that's how they describe it.
Well, that's another conversation.
Because the term, they don't just say because he has a big dick, because he has a good dick.
And so yeah, I think you had kind of spoke that earlier. It's like equating big with good.
Right. Where does the pleasure lie?
Well, there's another sub thing there too that's not being discussed because big doesn't mean hard. So
that's true.
That is another thing there because sometimes people have big dicks that they can't get hard.
That's right. That's true.
And so that's a whole different.
Are we really going to go down that route?
It's a rabbit hole, honey.
No, but that's life.
You know what? I get that, but can we focus on just the fetishness of it? Because there is definitely the biology that we can talk about, but I think that still the end of the day is that these women that I'm talking about were okay with keeping a man, right? In much the same way that you mentioned about sugar daddies, right? Except these are sugar mamas, and they're not rich or anything. They just want to have that man with them, and they don't care because it's about his dick.
Is that a survival mentality, Calvin, when you say that? And I ask that question because of this. If you have continuously learned that I don't need a man for a variety of things, I have learned how to survive without needing a man for love, for companionship. But I can't do without a man for sexual gratification. Is that a survival tactic or technique?
I believe so. And I can't speak for every situation, obviously, but I do think that you're right. There are people who have structured their lives around, I can take care of myself in most ways, except this one. But that's one thing. But the concern that I have is really not necessarily about the survival tactic of it. It's about the fact that you're setting yourself up for, as Nick said, something not working long term. Because if you don't demand more from him, you're going to be supporting him the rest of his life.
I even think about the bias of saying long term. Like, who's to say that all women want to be in long term relationships? That's an assumption that's something to subscribe to ascribe to value, to like that. And that's part of the bullshit that I think gets perpetuated too, that women are supposed to want to be in long-term relationships, but men don't necessarily, that shouldn't be our aim or like the goal, or like that's not in our purview. When we're ready, then we just kind of do it. But women are groomed from an early age to aspire to be married. So I had to check my own bias on that.
Amen.
Right.
I guess I didn't get that memo because I bought a house at age 27 with somebody. No, but I know what you're saying. The stereotype is definitely there. And I was socialized that way too. I recognize that, especially living in the early 70s and 80s, that a lot of the women, their whole point was to find a man. It wasn't about finding a job. It was about finding a man. Yeah. And it changed in the 80s. I mean, it drastically changed in the 80s. But in the 70s, that's all I heard. It's like, I need to get this man. I need to keep this man. There was a lot of that.
I think about the freedom that comes from that, too, with you being raised or knowing women who that was kind of what they were taught, like about being about men. Men were centralized, hence we have patriarchy, right? But then moving away from that to say, actually, like, no, like, this is not what I want to do. I don't need, I mean, like, that could be so freeing and so empowering, especially when you've been told that you're supposed to.
Yeah.
That you have to, in order to have value or to be worth something in society, you got to have a man. And to buck against that, imagine how powerful that might feel, like, to live outside of that and the freedom that comes with that. I mean,
you know, I was thinking about the scene in Insecure when I think the tall guy's name is Lawrence.
Yeah.
And when he was in the supermarket and the women offered to buy, the two white girls offered to buy him whatever, they ended up being, you know, having sex, and when he couldn't follow through,
to put that away.
So that scene came to my head too.
Yeah.
And I meant to mention it like an hour ago, but
yeah, and I thought about that in reference to, well, a couple different things. This whole thing about maybe what he imagined that experience to be like is not what it was really in reality. That's one, right? And also maybe a little bit of how he felt as a human being, especially after he couldn't keep it hard with the second girl. And then they were like, it was almost like they just forgot he was laying right there in the bed and continued.
So there's something bigger too. Number 3 on that is they had a conversation about how other black guys were better.
Oh,
Yes.
That's why I wanted to bring that up, because that whole fetishizing thing isn't just people taking these trips. This is an everyday life thing. They just picked him up in a supermarket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They didn't even have to go extra special to get this experience.
Yeah.
But it was also another example of they had expectations about what they were getting. And he was devastated.
Yeah.
And the expectations were where the interest was.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
The interest
And
would not have
assumed-
existed.
Yes, sir.
Right? The interest was in the assumption,
Right. Right.
but not in necessarily the reality.
And that also is what you need to get to the bottom of when somebody of a different race is showing interest in you. Where does your interest lie? Where does
Truly.
what is that about for real? But yeah, as soon as that thing was done, like the shift, you know, and he thought it was because he was so handsome.
Oh, sorry. It wasn't that.
Right.
You were
Right.
a tall black man.
Yeah.
Right. It was transactional.
Very transactional.
Yeah.
And you know, it's unfortunate when you think about something like that. And I love the way they set it up in the show, because it really looked like it was just normal. It was just talking to some girls. They showed some interest in me, and I'm lucky enough to take them home. That's what it felt like. And then you realize that they set you up.
And the thing about it is him relating that story to his boys, as you could imagine, right? That happens every day in the world, right? Do you tell that part?
Right.
Do you talk about how you felt like shit? Right? After, you couldn't, and then that's probably where the whole toxic masculinity thing comes in too, because do you even have a space to have that conversation with any of your boys?
Probably not.
And to tell the truth about what really happened, not the fantasy of what you think they want to hear about what it was.
Probably not. I mean, how many times have we been on these various dating sites or even porn, and we've seen some bullshit about, and I call it bullshit because that's typically what it is, bullshit about let me get the BBC 8 inches or more.
Right.
Or 9 inches or more. It's like, wow, is that really the value of what the black body is or has come to in 2020?
Well, to Nick's point,
1970,
that didn't start in 2020.
Right.
Well, I know, but I mean,
I mean,
continued through 2020.
Right. No, and I think that it's even worse now than it was, because there's instant gratification. We got apps where you can go and hook up with somebody in 5 minutes. Right. So I don't have an answer to that. I think that that's definitely something to explore, is like, we continue to see this happening, and it's not getting smaller. So Previously.
No pun intended.
So yeah, I stepped right into that one. But that question I asked near the beginning is, why do we still have to keep dealing with this? And unfortunately, the answer that I'm coming with, we're not going to get away from it.
Yeah, I just think we as Black men who have used it to get what we've wanted when it's been convenient for us have to also think about, while you're using it to get what you want, what is it costing you that you didn't even realize? Just like Lawrence.
Yes.
When he decided that he wanted to, go on that little thing, that menage a trois, and didn't realize what it was going to cost, what it was going to take from his soul for being in that experience, because that is something that he would never be able to forget, right? Yeah. But you came, but was it worth it for you to come again?
But he couldn't, though. But he couldn't, though.
And was dismissed right after.
Immediately.
That was so wrong, though.
It was so disrespectful.
It was. Well, then they took a line, and then I want to say they called someone or text someone and put their clothes back on.
Yeah.
And left.
Yeah, because it was, like I said, it was like this.
Literally transactional.
Yeah.
And your worth is attached to what you can do for me. That's and if you cannot do it, you have no value to me whatsoever.
Yeah. And the sad thing about it is that I think we've had these experiences within our own race for the very same things, the same issues, but we might have not seen it that way.
We've seen it that way. No, but you're very right, because I know that we spend a lot of time talking about interracial stuff here, but this stereotype exists for Black men, period.
Absolutely.
And so, it's tough when you have that expectation held over your head whenever you meet any new person. And it's rough to try to figure out, are they interested in talking to me, or they only interested in this expectation?
So you're saying that regardless of the race, Black men are still going to be fetishized?
Yeah, but I don't think, I'm not saying that every person does, but yes. Okay. Because there are plenty of women who want a man with a big dick, right?
Horse hung.
Yeah. And so
As if that's
is still technically a fetish. Even if they are another Black woman or a Black man or whatever, it's still a fetish. Because you're looking at the person as not being that person. You're just looking at that archetype.
Alrighty. Do we have anything else on that, Aaron?
No, I think we've covered.
We've unpacked that.
We've covered Barbara and Esther and all of them.
And Phil and Jim.
I don't know why y'all keep leaving out Molly.
and Molly.
I'm Akil Johnson, the Poet God. Thank you for listening.